I bought the house for the quiet, not for a stack of official letters that would end up living on my kitchen counter like an unwelcome roommate. Within days, a single sheet slid into my mailbox, and like bad wallpaper, it changed the whole room. Notice of non-compliance, formal language, a reference number, Karen's name at the bottom, HOA president. There wasn't a picture, there wasn't a measurable dimension, just a tone that suggested authority without the courtesy of explanation. I read it 3 times before I allowed myself to feel annoyed. The wording was polite, neutral, precise, in a way that meant nothing, referred to section time to cure, may result in further action. 10 days to fix a problem that the paper refused to describe. That's where this begins with a question I asked in a reasonable voice. What exactly is the problem? I sent a short, plain email. I offered to fix whatever needed fixing. I expected a clarification and ideally an end. Instead, I got process. A second notice arrived 3 days later, same header, slightly different language, a suggestion that an inspection might occur within a vague window. No name, no time, no photograph, only the implication that someone would be at my house when I least expected it. So I did the sensible thing. I took photos, I cleaned, I documented, I made a folder. You'd be surprised how calming a folder can feel when you're trying to make reality legible. For a while, I believed in good faith. I believed paperwork was a clumsy but honest tool that someone would say, here's the measurement we meant, and we'd move on. But authority is funny that way. It doesn't always reveal itself by force. Sometimes it reveals itself through momentum notices, inspections, adjusted deadlines, a machine that moves forward simply because it is moving. You comply, the machine keeps rolling. You comply again, the machine keeps rolling. Then I went to the meeting. Karen sat at the head of the table with the kind of practiced calm that looks harmless until you watch how it works. Agenda items, budget items, a few friendly nods, then enforcement mentioned as if it were weather. She spoke about patterns, about protecting community character, about the need to be consistent. When another homeowner asked about a similar notice, she softened, extended a timeline, suggested options. Same rule, different application. Context mattered. Relationship mattered. It was the first time I realized that consistency on paper and consistency in practice can be 2 different things. After the meeting, a neighbor spoke to me quietly and said what other neighbors had said in passing: it's easier to comply. You get on with your life. That's how momentum keeps working. People step aside rather than step in. The notices kept coming, inspections were announced as possibilities, then door hangers appeared after a car slowed by my driveway and never left a name or a time. The fines started as small symbolic numbers, the kind you pay without thinking. The sum wasn't the point. The sum bought continuity. So I documented. Door hangers, the flimsy paper left on my doorknob after an inspection attempt. Screenshots of the portal where notices appeared like weather receipts for materials I hadn't intended to buy. I logged the times cars slowed by my driveway, the neighbor who lingered in passing conversations, the way invitations quieted. An unexpected tightness settled into mornings. I checked email first instead of coffee, listening for the ping that meant another deadline. Small things, yes, but accumulation has its own gravity, and gravity changes how you move through a neighborhood you assumed was neutral. I read the bylaws slowly, the sections I'd skimmed when I bought the place. Reasonable board discretion consistent with community standards. Phrases that sound sensible until you watch someone live inside their edges. Karen's name was on every notice, always in the same place, same font, like a constant. Notices reset with new language, as if the previous letters had never existed. Minutes referenced board review without recorded votes. The pattern stopped feeling like incompetence and started feeling like design. I didn't shout from the rooftops. I didn't stage a public confrontation. People are gentle with each other in small towns and suburban streets. Kindness is mostly practiced in low tones. Karen means well, someone told me. It's easier to do what she asks. Easier became distance. Invitations dwindled. Small talk thinned. The process didn't just produce paperwork. It produced social separation. That's how power spreads quietly, not by force, but by making resistance costly. Finally, I called an attorney. It felt like a big step because it is, but it wasn't motivated by anger. It was motivated by exhaustion. The lawyer's first request was simple and stabilizing: give me the sequence. Dates, notices, replies, receipts. Don't give me rhetoric. Give me the timeline. Momentum looks like policy. until you lay it out in order and demand accounting. We drafted a narrow clinical letter. No drama, no accusations, just requests. Cite the specific covenant language you're relying on, provide documentation of any inspection findings, provide records of any board vote that authorize fines and suspend fines pending clarification. The strategy was boring and brilliant. Force the machine to stop by asking it to show its work. My attorney explained the playbook in a way that made the rest feel inevitable. Ask for the records, don't personalize, demand procedure. He printed the timeline and underlined every unsecured assertion. He showed me where the bylaws required a vote or a finding before a fine could be charged. Then he prepared a narrow clinical filing, not a broad attack, but a scalpel that required the HOA to stop and show its work. Sending it felt like putting a weight down. Oddly, it felt relieving. Karen responded quickly and loudly by administrative standards. She broadened the frame, cited more sections, scheduled a special compliance review, tightened deadlines. She believed momentum could drown out questions. That's the conventional twist. People expect escalation. But the real twist was procedural. By placing requests into a formal record, we changed the terrain. Momentum is hard to maintain when every step must be documented. The compliance meeting arrived. I went. My lawyer sat separately, which mattered because it changed how my presence would be read. Karen ran the meeting the way she ran correspondence, efficient interruptions, time to break rhythm decisions, moved before scrutiny. When asked for documented findings or board votes supporting the fines, she reframed inquiry as obstruction, urgency as necessity. It was not a spectacle, it was a practiced rhythm of control. The attorney's response was deliberate and patient. He introduced timeline, pointed to the bylaws, asked for the citation that the process required. He didn't shout. He simply followed the sequence. That calm clarity made gaps visible. When authority is required to prove itself, it can't rely solely on the inertia it has built. My attorney had asked for the procedure, and by asking, he left a record that the process itself had to answer to, full of overlapping deadlines emptied. The calendar that had been full of overlapping deadlines emptied. The HOA didn't issue an apology. Karen stayed in her role. No one made a spectacle of it. But their language and communications shifted. Vague references gave way to citations. Motions were accompanied by recorded votes. Meeting minutes began to include more documentation than before. The authority that had relied on continuity now had to justify continuity. Here's the moral I carry with me now. Authority is not the same as correctness. Momentum masquerading as policy will feel inevitable until someone insists on proof. The cure for that quiet inevitability isn't anger or spectacle. It's procedure. Ask for the vote. Ask for the finding. Ask for the record. Boring, slow, administratively tedious, yes. Effective, absolutely. The aftermath left residue. I counted hours lost, evenings turned into document sessions, mornings that began with calculations instead of coffee. Trust doesn't snap back overnight, and I don't pretend the neighbors suddenly acted differently in some grand way. The fines were reversed without fanfare. Account balances were corrected as if clerical errors had unrolled months of pressure. No apology, no dramatic vindication, just administrative correction. That in itself felt like a kind of justice. If you're holding a folder like I was, don't assume silence is safety. Make the steps visible. Ask for the record. Ask for the vote. Keep copies. Note dates. Request minutes. Don't wait until the folder is too heavy. The rest can be boring and slow, but it's the part that actually restores balance. It matters. So let me finish with a question and an invitation. When you get a letter that sounds official, do you assume it's right, or do you make it legible? Have you ever had a quiet process settle over you? And if so, what did you do? Document, ignore, fight, or walk away? Tell me what worked or what you wish you'd done. Because these small administrative things end up building the shape of our daily lives unless someone insists on clarity. If any of this landed with you, if you've ever carried a folder and wondered whether to bring it into the light, share the story. Quietly, plainly. It's not about starting a fight. It's about making sure that next time the mail drops something heavy through your slot, you know to make it legible before you make it personal.